Connective tissue. Welcome to connective tissue. I think this is the most varied of all the tissues. And you remember all the other tissues. We talked about epithelial tissue already. We mentioned muscle tissue a lot. And I'll probably introduce that today, actually. Just because there's only a couple of things you have to know, because we're going to go crazy with muscle tissue in 3 or 4 labs from now. And the other one is nervous tissue, and that's the same thing. So there's very little to show you before the practical on muscle and nerve. But connective tissue, we're going to live here for a bit. Let me just tell you something about connective tissue. It's kind of weird. So my definition of connective tissue is sparse cells. I don't even know what that means. Sparse cells. So it's like different cells, different types of cells. Some are specific, some are common to all connective tissues. Plus, this is like you're going to do math now, plus a matrix. And sometimes you can refer to the matrix or within the matrix as a ground substance. So, like bone is a connective tissue. I told you that. Bone is a connective tissue because you're going to hear about the cells of bone. They're osteo is the prefix, like osteocyte, osteoblast, osteoclast. Probably got this in lecture. That should sound really familiar, but it's connective tissue. And it's basically connective tissue because it's all derived from the same stem tissue. Derived, which was where it comes from. And that stem tissue is called mesenchyme. Remember I always tell you the story of on a Friday night where the sperm meets the egg in the fallopian tube, and then those two haploid cells, like they only have 23 chromosomes each, meet, and then the nuclei fuse and they become one cell. And that's a zygote. That's like the beginning. That's Frank when he's 8 days old. And then Frank implants in the endometrium of the uterus, which we'll learn later. And the tissues start to develop. So mesenchymal tissue will develop all our connective tissue as a stem tissue. So bone is from there too. And then you have this other stuff called blood. Blood is a connective tissue. So let's just go back to bone for a second. The osteo cells, like osteocyte, and the matrix is calcified matrix and protein matrix. Blood has a fluid matrix called plasma. Crazy, right? And then you have adipose, and that's fat tissue, lipid, triglyceride, with these big vacuole type cells called adipocytes that store triglyceride. But it's connective tissue. This is called loose connective tissue. You're going to see that, loose connective tissue. A lot of adipose around organs, around your eyes. It's a really important insulator for one thing. And then you probably heard of tendons, right? Tendons. But remember, tendons connect muscle to bone. Ligaments. Ligaments connect bone to bone. Then you have this stuff called fascia. Fascia. There's a really weird name too. It's like aponeurosis. You didn't hear this in the bone. Aponeurosis is the same as fascia. So fascia is like that white stuff that connects muscle to muscle, packages it. Not the fat in between like red meat, but the white, hard, undigestible protein, right? And then you have a specialized CT called cartilage. Cartilage, and there's 3 types of cartilage. That's all you need to know, the 3. So it's a lot of stuff, So blood is really, that's kind of weird. It's the most unique of all the connective tissues. Everything else has a lot in common. Do you guys remember the most common or abundant protein in the human body? the protein. Begins with a col, ends in an ogen.
Collagen.
You got it. Very good. How'd you figure that out? So collagen. And this is the most abundant protein in your body, which makes connective tissue the most abundant tissue in your body because of that protein. Gives it flexibility, gives it strength, gives it some support too. So that's the general overview of connective tissue, if you can dig all that. So let's take a look at this. This is a nice picture. I like this one from your lab book or your online lab book. I try to take as much as I can because they're shorter than the lecture part. Because yeah, you don't talk about this in lecture, but let's get to what we need to know. So collagen, really important. And you really can't see it so well here. These wiry looking things is not collagen. Those are going to be called reticular fibers, really. So the collagen's in the back, right? And it's thicker than elastic. Let's look back here. And then you have these elastic fibers, which are kind of wiry. They kind of bend a little bit. So be careful with elastic. Elastic versus collagen. Elastic versus reticular. So you see his nucleus right here? This is one of the sparse cells in something like loose connective tissue, and they're called fibroblast nuclei. So fibroblast is a cell that produces collagen. So they have a look to it. So the nuclei you see in this kind of connective tissue is going to be a fibroblast nucleus. The collagen doesn't have a nucleus, it's made of protein. Then get to know this one. The reticular is kind of dark lines, and the cells are in between. These are all still fibroblast cells, right? They're still fibroblasts. So these are the words: collagen, elastic fibers, and reticular fibers. So this is a really good slide just to get you into the actual types of fibers that and cells that are in there.
How is collagen thick?
How is it what?
To me, the elastic looks thicker than the collagen.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I agree. In this picture, it looks thicker, but collagen is thicker. Let me see. Like you see this back here, like this, that stain back there, that's collagen.
Oh,
So this has everything. Like this could be an elastic fiber. You wouldn't have to tell me the difference in a picture like this. I'm just kind of showing you. And reticular is more like this one here. And here's your fibroblast nucleus. So really just get used to the words, because I'm not going to put on this and have you try to guess. Maybe this I would put on, because this is truly a reticular connective tissue. This you just have to say loose connective tissue, like areolar connective tissue when you see that. So just get used to the sparse cells here. That's a great question. So this one showing you embryonic, and I'll write that here so you remember. This is embryonic. Embryonic CT. So what this is Frank when he's an embryo in his first 8 weeks of life. So it really hasn't developed into true like reticular fibers or collagen fibers yet. It's still a stem tissue. So that's embryonic CT. And the ground substance in embryonic CT is it's like gelatinous, gelatinous. And you'll see that in the when we go to APR later. It'll give you specific pictures of embryonic mesenchymal tissue. Remember, mesenchymal is the stem cell. So those are the cells that's producing the ground substance, which is protein, like a gelatinous hybrid. And it's not truly collagen yet. But you know collagen. I'm really excited about that. So here's some of the names you're going to have to know. CT proper, like this is, and CT has different functions in different areas, like, and this is what you need to know. Like you have loose connective tissue. Again, the dense is down here, and then loose connective tissue. So this, and it's really good the way the checklist goes over this to help you. But these are the three loose connective tissues. Areolar is probably the most common. This is the one that's kind of in and around organs. It's got all of the fibers in it, especially collagen, of course, and fibroblasts, elastic fibers, and reticular fibers. And where is it? This is important. Like I told you about epithelial tissue. Where do we find it? Superficial fascia below the skin. Below the skin. So in the hypodermis, which you'll learn next week about the hypodermis. So it's anchoring the skin to underlying muscles. And I'll show you that later. So areola is probably the most common one. Adipose, you'll never have a problem with adipose. It looks unique. Areolar and reticular, you're gonna have to figure out. But adipose is, when you see it, it's very large cells, right? So they look empty because they're like vacuoles, but they have triglyceride in them. And so lipids within it. So they're called adipocytes. And they store lipids, which is stored for energy. So you see a lot of that subcutaneous, again, in the hypodermis, those yellow fatty cells behind your eyes, around your heart, everywhere, not just in your abdomen. Okay. And it's connective tissue. That's the key. Reticular connective tissue, which is loose. You got to classify it. And that's like a framework. I like that framework. And this word stroma. Stroma means framework. Stroma. It's always CT. It's always connective tissue. So it forms like the structure, or you know when you're building a house, right? And you put up the 2x4s and it's got like a frame, and then you fill everything in. So the stroma, which is mostly reticular connective tissue, forms that frame of your organs. And the organs kind of compartmentalize nicely with reticular. So you have to see it. You have to see it. Now the dense, you have dense regular, dense irregular, and elastic fibers are considered dense. But I would live here for dense, the two, dense regular and dense irregular, and where they are. And dense regular, you got to be careful with this one because it kind of looks like smooth muscle. When you see smooth muscle, I'll show you that later. So this is dense because it has very thick collagen fibers, right? Kind of like the low E string on your guitar, Sophia, compared to the E string is more like a reticular fiber. I know you guys don't know what I'm talking about, but it's like a thickness. So collagen is thicker, especially in dense. So that's what makes it dense, the thick collagen. And of course, there's fibroblast nuclei because that's what makes the collagen. The collagen is made in these cells called fibroblasts. When you hear blast, again, you probably got this in lecture. A blast is like a producing cell, an immature cell that just is there to make another tissue. So what the tissue that a fibroblast is making is collagen. So fibroblasts have the machinery to build proteins. Like you heard of the ribosome, right? Remember the ribosome, the rough endoplasmic reticulum. So the fibroblasts have a lot of that, and they're building amino acids to build this collagen. It's a miracle. So I mentioned before tendons and ligaments. Tendons connect muscle to bone, ligaments connect bone to bone. So this is probably the one you'd probably think of, like if I asked you guys, if I asked Jonathan, what he might know, but I would ask, give me an example of connective tissue. You may say, well, my Achilles tendon is connective tissue because it's connecting my gastrocnemius muscle to my calcaneus, my foot, which is true. But there's so many others you have to know that's dense regular. You're going to see a structure called the pubic symphysis, which is between the two pubic bones and the pelvis. And that's a dense, regular connective tissue, and fibrocartilage actually too. So we'll see that later. So mostly tendons and ligaments. And we'll be looking at that in the lab. And we'll look at it today. And you can look at it in your APR. Shoo. So dense irregular, this is pretty common too. This looks a little different, and you have to differentiate the difference between the two, and we got to do that together. So I can help you out visually what the two look like. So of course, dense irregular is a little bit less thick in its collagen. It has collagen fibers, but it's a little less thick. This one's important because we're going to see that in the dermis of the skin. So that's going to be your answer on the test. What is the dermis made of mostly? Which type of connective tissue? And you're going to say dense, irregular connective tissue, Finizio. I'm going to give you 5 points. Right? I don't want to get into what perichondrium is because that's talking about cartilage. But organ capsules, joint capsules too, which we'll do the joints. Like you'll hear about a synovial joint. Did you get the articulations yet? Yes or no? Anybody do that in lecture? Say no or yes.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Good. So I don't feel like I'm so far behind in my lecture. So like a synovial joint is the most movable joint. So of course it has tendons and ligaments, but it has a joint capsule. Joint capsule is dense, irregular connective tissue. It's almost like a rubbery ace bandage around all your movable joints. Like synovial, I keep saying synovial joints because that's important because they're the most movable joints, like your shoulder, your knee, your elbow, yeah, your ankle, and your hip. Those are all synovial joints. So this joint capsule, I gotta write this in for you on recording here. Joint capsules for later. You'll thank me for this. Okay. And then you have elastic. I mean, it's dense, but I don't really like to talk about it too much here because elastic connective tissue could be part of a lot of things. You know, it gives it elasticity. So let's get that down. It's got collagen, but it has elastic fibers, which you saw on page 1. Elastic fibers give it that tensile and, of course, elasticity and compliance. So it can stretch and comply. Stretch, gets longer, and complies, goes back to its original shape and healthy and correctly. So you need good elastic fibers in certain places. And I'm going to say it right here. This is another question. Where do you see a lot of elastic connective tissue? And I'm going to say the aorta. You might not even know what the aorta is right now. That's an A&P too. But I'll tell you right now, the aorta is the largest artery in the body. And the definition of an artery is taking blood from the heart. So the aorta is right off of the heart, and you got this massive left ventricle that pumps blood out of the heart with contracting cardiac muscle. But it's so much pressure into this vessel called the aorta that the aorta has to be elastic to handle that. So there's a lot of elastic fibers in the aorta. Aorta, the largest artery in the body. Look at this. How does this look? Okay, this is a kind of a arrangement, little flow chart here. Start. Don't tell me when to start. It's either loose or dense. And look at the staining type. Now, this is lab. This will help you when you go through your APR and your atlas, how they stain, right? Are they dark? Are they light? Short or long? So the darker ones are more reticular fibers. Remember those? Remember you said they kind of look like collagen because they look thicker. They're just darker, not so much thicker. And this is loose connective tissue. These are the 3 loose. Might as well memorize that. Yeah, adipose tissue. There's nothing that looks like adipose tissue. These two we're going to have trouble with. Dense, regular elastic tissue versus dense, irregular. So, look at this. This is cool. They run in different directions. Like dense, irregular may be a little more branch looked than fully covered with collagen. Who knows? Who knows, right? So this right here is loose connective tissue. This is loose. Number 1, it's loose. And you can see collagen is in the back. You see that, Sophia? It's pointing better now. Now this one points better. So this is a loose connective tissue. And there's the nuclei. It can only be a fibroblast. And you have all this wiry stuff. It almost looks like it shouldn't be there when you're looking at a microscope. And the elastic fibers kind of coil and a little thinner than your reticular fibers. So this is loose, also known as areolar. And that's the word you could use. So you could say loose, but you really have to say areolar on this picture. Let's take a closer look. So if we had in a microscope, this would be like your scanning power down here. Okay, I see something on the microscope. Let's put it up to, that's 4x, right? 4x times 10 of the ocular lens. Then we move it up to low power, which is 10x. Oh, I see something. I see a nucleus. Oh, shit. And then I say, okay, I'm feeling good. I'm using my fine focus. Let's go up to high power. Then we're here. Wow, now I can see. Well, I see a nuclei. I could see reticular fibers a little thicker, maybe the thinner elastic fibers. I won't ask you that, Sophia. Like I won't ask you in a picture. What your answer here? Okay, Finizio, this is areolar CT. That's your answer. So here's another loose one. This one never should be confused with anything else. This is loose, but you can't just say loose for the picture. This is adipose. So let's take a look. Okay, we're scanning it. And this is where you burn your eyes with the microscope, because you notice that it's kind of a void in the middle of these cells. So the light's going to come up right into your eyes from the bottom of the microscope. And you lower that because it's burning. This is where everybody's like squinting and in pain, because their eyes are getting so much light, and it's kind of annoying. So that would be like 4x low power. Then we go to 10x. I'm sorry, 4x scanning power. And then 10x is low power. Well, now I can see that's something. And it looks like still my eyes are burning like crazy. Let's just, because he told me to go to 40x, let's go to high power. So 40x is high power. Now I can see things. Again, my eyes are burning. I got to adjust the light source and the diaphragm and the iris so my eyes don't hurt. And here's the cell membrane of adipocytes. And here's the nuclei of adipocytes. So this is the cytoplasm, and it's got a lot of triglyceride in it and stored energy. Remember, this is adipose. You can say adipose CT, but by the time you get to the practical in a couple of weeks, you'll be friends with adipose, and you just say adipose, and I'll be happy. And there's collagen, but it's kind of dispersed on the outside in the extracellular area. Extracellular means outside the cell. It's kind of thin, right? So nothing really looks like this. So this is kind of an easy one. Come on. Everybody's going to get that right. This is a reticular, or reticular. And it's still loose. Still loose. We're still in the loose group. Loose goose. And this is called reticular. Be careful with this one, because some books and some slides actually stain different colors. Right? So you're looking at this, okay. 4x, the scanning power. I see something, finally. Finally, I've been working on this stupid microscope for 2 weeks, and now I can actually see something. Moving the stage around and changing the course adjustment, then doing the fine adjustment. Now I see something with my own vision. So 4x is scanning power. Then you go to low power, which is 10x. And don't forget to multiply the 10x from the ocular lens. And then you go to high power. Now I could see. Now I could see reticular fibers. Again, I'm still confused. Well, I can't really tell the difference between elastic fibers and reticular fibers, right? So you have to really look at more elastic tissue to see that, because you could say reticular fibers here. And lymphocytes, now they're throwing you a little curveball, because this is another sparse cell that's in a lot of connective tissue, especially around the organs and also under the skin. Lymphocytes are white blood cells, really good at tracking down viruses and cancer. So you have the reticular fibers. You see they're kind of short and not so wavy. They're irregular, but they're kind of, they really don't look descript, And then you have nuclei. And nuclei is still fibroblasts, because there's collagen in there. It's in the matrix. It's just not organized as well as when you see it in dense. So this is your reticular, probably the hardest one to name. So we'll go through APR and see what they got. This doesn't look like anything we saw so far. This is like wavy. This is a weird one. So I'll tell you right off the bat, this is no longer loose. Now we're into dense. And this one particularly is dense regular. CT. So again, you look at it in low power. Now listen, low power, scanning power, 4x. Now I can't tell what that is from 4x. I know there's something. I see dark staining nuclei. I see kind of like thick lines or thick tissue in there. And then I go to low power, 10x. Now, okay, pay attention to this. This is where it really gets tricky. this kind of looks like smooth muscle as well. So I have to differentiate smooth muscle or even skeletal muscle. But we're going to look at skeletal muscle and smooth muscle, and you can see that there's obviously a difference between the two. And we'll go through that. So this is dense regular connective tissue. So let's go up to high power, 40x. And now you can see the thick collagen in there. It's kind of filling every space. There's no open spaces. You have the fibroblast nuclei, which are kind of lined up. Now be careful with this in muscle. I want to say this again. Make sure you know the difference between dense regular connective tissue and the muscle tissues, because they look very similar. So I'll tell you right now, skeletal muscle has striations, and we'll see that. Smooth muscle doesn't. So smooth muscle would even be a problem, but smooth muscle doesn't have the way this fibroblast nuclei are lined up. It looks a little wavy. Okay, it looks a little wavy. And most of the tissue for dense regular connective tissue has that. So then you're gonna ask, where do we find dense regular connective tissue? Can anybody answer that? Where's an example of dense regular CT?
Tendons, ligaments.
Tendons and ligaments. You got it. You got it. Well said. Right on the money, my friend. So now we're in dense again. This is dense connective tissue, but it's irregular. Don't forget the CT. Usually I set up the test like this. I'll put all the epithelial tissue in one group, and then all the connective tissue in another, and then the muscle and nerve kind of mixed in, if that helps you. So let's look at the tissue first of all. Close up of the tissue. So the same, 400x. So this is low power. So again, this is not as linear, right, as this. Dense regular, dense irregular. You see the difference? Dense regular, dense irregular. And this is part of our dermis. That's the answer. Finicio says, where do we find this? We find it in the dermis, which is below the epidermis. So this slide you may see here. Okay, so we didn't learn this yet. We didn't learn the skin. This is skin. So this is the top layer of skin, top layer of epidermis. And the epidermis stops here. This is all epidermis above where I'm drawing. So this is all epidermis. And this is dermis. So epi means above, epidermis, and then dermis. And this is all of this in here. Even here is dermis. And that's what type of tissue? Dense, irregular connective tissue. Dense, irregular. Dense, regular. Dense, irregular. Dense, regular. Sophie's going to write a song about this later. Okay? Phew. Okay. Low power. Okay, now I see kind of wavy lines. Scanning power, sorry. 4x times 10, 40x. Then we go to low power, 10x. Okay, now I can tell they're wavy lines. And then we go to high power, 40x. And now you have to know the difference between reticular fibers and elastic. This is elastic CT. Still see some fibroblast nucleus. So let's see if I can do this. Elastic connective tissue. Now it's elastic, sorry, it was reticular. Reticular. Elastic. Reticular. Elastic. Reticular. No, that's not reticular. What's this one? Quick. Dense regular. Reticular. Elastic. So it's a visual thing. And then in 2 weeks, so if we have a nice song, we could play along with, and we can narrate the PowerPoint with the song. Okay? How are we doing so far? We okay? We awake?
Yeah.
Frank's on his game today. Like always, like always.
We're doing good.
I'm not.
Madison, I'm not doing so well. All right, so it wasn't that much. We started connective tissue. We saw that there's loose connective tissue. We know that there's adipose is loose connective tissue, reticular is loose connective tissue, and areolar is loose connective tissue. So now you know what it looks like at 3 different powers. There's only 2 real dense ones, but elastic technically is dense. I don't want to argue with the book. So you have dense regular, dense irregular, and elastic. So know the difference between elastic and reticular. And later on, make sure you know the difference between dense regular and the muscles. There's 3 muscle types. There's cardiac, smooth, and skeletal. Listen to me when I tell you. This is important. Okay, we good? Any questions? Are you with me? Let's hear some good questions. Well, it couldn't be too many questions right now. You're just wondering what the hell is he talking about and how am I going to learn all this stuff? But you will. All right. So now we're going to go into the cartilages. And there's only 3 cartilages you have to learn. So cartilage is connective tissue, a specialized connective tissue. Like cartilage is a specialized connective tissue. Bone is a specialized connective tissue. And blood is a specialized connective tissue. So here are the specialized connective tissues. There's a couple of cartilages, 3 cartilages, and then the bone part. Let me just get rid of this. It's in my way. So I'll tell you right now, you see this stuff behind me? This hyaline cartilage. So hyaline cartilage, of course it's got collagen. Every connective tissue has collagen, except for the blood, not so much. So diffuse collagen fibers, and it usually stains the color behind me, but you'll see. So it's got a lot of glycoproteins, which is really not that important right now. But hyaline cartilage is the basis for all our long bones. Remember I talked about mesenchyme, right? And Frank, when he was 6 days old and he's stuck in the uterus, implanted in the uterus, then he starts developing tissue. And one of the tissues from mesenchyme is going to be your long bones, your compact bones mostly. So before your bones become bones, they're hyaline cartilage. If you remember this from lecture, it's called endochondral ossification. So chondro, here's another prefix, a lot of prefixes in anatomy and physiology. Chondro means cartilage. So now we're not talking about osteocytes yet. We're talking about chondrocytes. So hyaline cartilage has a specific look, and you have to know where it is. You have to know where it is. So locations, well, you didn't do the bones yet, but the cartilage that connects your ribs to your sternum, your ribs to your breastbone, is hyaline cartilage. The ends of your long bones, it's called articular cartilage, is hyaline cartilage. And basically that's a remnant of our bone model from when Frank was 8 weeks old. Because all bone starts from cartilage, mesenchyme, connective tissue. Crazy. And we'll look at the pictures. You're going to hear this word chondrocyte, and you're going to hear the word lacunae. Lacunae means lake, or it's really more like a pond, but it means lake, so whoever made that up. Then there's fibrocartilage. This is the cartilage that's by the pubic symphysis, or the pubic symphysis is made of this. Your intervertebral discs. That's between your vertebrae, right? Intervertebral means between your vertebrae. Like you've heard of herniated disc, slipped disc, bulging disc in your spinal column, and that's fibrocartilage. And then you might hear of meniscus in the synovial, in the knee, meniscus, or menisci, because there's 4 of them really. There's a medial, lateral on both knees. So menisci are those little discs in between your femur and your tibia and your knee. And they're made of fibrocartilage. So that has a certain look. Histology, right? We're doing histology, study of tissue here. Make no mistake. And then here's one, elastic cartilage. Now, elastic cartilage is, yeah, we already heard about elastic CT, but the answer has to be elastic cartilage if I show you these pictures. There's only 3 places that has that, and I'll go into that. what it looks like and where it is. So of course it adds elasticity. This is not the stuff that's in the aorta. No, no. The aorta doesn't have elastic cartilage. The aorta has elastic connective tissue within its walls. You got to know that. And compact bone, nothing looks like compact bone. That's the easiest of all the histologies for us to look at. And then you're going to look at it 1,000 times, and you probably saw it in lecture already. Yeah. Flow chart alert. Here we go. Slow flow chart alert. Let's see what your author has here. So this is just showing you bone, which is going to be compact bone. And the fibrocartilage is only in those places I told you. And let's see what large cartilage is. Yeah, fibrocartilage. Here's elastic cartilage. Here's hyaline cartilage and fibrocartilage. Those are the three cartilage. Gives you a little background about it. This one. I don't love this flow chart as much as the last one. And the one in epithelial was great. So we have two types of bone, compact and spongy. So the one you're going to see is going to be compact bone. I don't know if you're going to get to see spongy bone in this PowerPoint. Okay. So basically we're just looking at bone versus cartilage here. That's what I'm seeing. You seeing this? Jonathan, you seeing the difference? It's cartilage on the right and all the bone stuff on the left. That's what I'm seeing. So what the hell does it look like? Okay, so this one here, let's take a look at this one again. Scanning power. Now this doesn't look like anything I've seen. It looks like you got these little white things, some darkness. I'm gonna go up to low power at 10x. And yeah, okay, now I see something. I'm looking at the purple stuff here in those cells. So now we get close up. And it's a little different color than the one behind me. This is my favorite cartilage, I think, because this is hyaline cartilage. Let me spell it without writing with that ridiculously thick font. It's called hyaline. Not the one down here in Manhattan where I could walk over and walk down the west side on that park called the High Line. It's hyaline. And this is cartilage. You have to say cartilage. This is the first cartilage we're learning. So you can't just say CT. You can't just say connective tissue. It's easy, but you can't just say that. So here we go. So what are we looking at? All of this in here is your collagen matrix. Remember, sparse cells with a matrix. So it's a collagen matrix. And they have glycoproteins as well. So there's a little carbohydrate in there. You know, this glucosamine. You ever hear of glucosamine? You know, you take that to make your cartilage better. You know, you go to Costco, buy a big jug of glucosamine because it's pretty much a precursor to collagen. It makes your skin really nice, and Kylie Jenner makes billions of dollars on it. So that's really what that is in your cartilage. Because CT is everywhere and collagen's everywhere. But this is hyaline cartilage. Then you see, like right here, this is chondrocytes with the nucleus. Remember, chondro means cartilage. Chondrocyte, and cyte means a functional mature cell, cyte. Like blast, remember I said blast before? That is an immature producing cell, blastic cell. Cyte is just hanging out in the tissue, making sure everything's working good. And then it's hard to say, but it looks black here. That's the lacuna, lacunae, the lake. So the chondrocyte is kind of laying, this is like two chondrocytes, kind of double nucleus, whatever. So the chondrocyte is in lacunae. It's like a little crib, a fluid crib that the chondrocyte hangs out in and receives all the nutrients through that liquid. And it's really extracellular fluid, obviously. So it's getting its oxygen, it's getting its amino acids to build proteins, and it's laying down more collagen. So chondrocytes and chondroblasts too do the same thing, but I'm not showing you chondroblasts. I'm just showing, all you have to say here, and here it is. You have to know it's hyaline cartilage, number one. It's, what are we seeing? Chondrocytes in lacunae. Where do we find this? In the costocartilage and around the nose, that nose cartilage, that, that stuff in your face that's kind of rubbery. Your larynx, your voice box, there's a lot of hyaline cartilage there. And at the end of long bones, you really want to make me happy. If I ask you, where do you find hyaline cartilage? You're going to say, it's the articular cartilage on the end of long bones that form articulations, especially in synovial joints, physio. And I'm going to really smile. Okay. Phew. So this is more fibrocartilage. Fibrocartilage. Cartilage, you have to say cartilage. This one's one word too. Yeah. Okay, that's fibrocartilage. So where do we find fibrocartilage? It also has chondrocytes and lacunae. This is your intervertebral disc, menisci. Meniscus is singular. And your pubic symphysis. Those structures. So this one's kind of hard. So again, that's cartilage. Here's a close-up of hyaline cartilage with chondrocytes and lacunae. This one, I really wouldn't expect you to know. You wouldn't know that this is what type of cartilage this is. So all you're asking here is it's a chondrocyte in lacunae. Yeah, man. What do you think this is? You see osteo, right? Osteo. This is what? What would you call this? This is not cartilage anymore.
Compact.
Bone.
Yeah, this is bone, compact bone. If you really want to make physio happy, you say compact bone. But for the test, we didn't learn bone technically yet in lab, so you can just say bone. But this is compact bone. And this is the bone that, gives us support, anchor for muscles, movement, storing calcium. Because what is the cell? The osteocyte is the cell. There's no other cells. You're going to learn other cells like, if you haven't already, like osteoblast, builds bone, stores calcium. Then you have osteoclast. That resorbs bone. It takes the calcium out, class. It's like a white blood cell with enzymes and hydrochloric acid, dissolves bone. Blast builds, class destroy. Bob the Builder, Wreck-It Ralph. Bob the Builder is a blast, Wreck-It Ralph is a class. So tomorrow morning we'll watch those TV shows. while Sophie is playing the guitar, writing her songs about reticular and elastic cartilage. So this is the osteon. That's the osteon, or haversion system. Haversion, it's the same thing. Where central canal, where all the osteocytes are getting their nutrients from the arteries, and wastes are being taken out through the veins. Remember, arteries away from the heart to the tissue, veins drain back to the heart, all the carbon dioxide and waste. There could be lymph vessels as well, LYMPH, which kind of reabsorbs excess fluid, and it carries your dietary lipids and some white blood cells as well. So let's go to high power on this. It's still, now you can see the lamella, which is the layers. Like the osteon is like if you cut a tree down and you're looking from the top of the stump, and you see the rings. But you see these things, they look like ants. These are osteocytes. Lacuna. This is the central canal. And then there's these little canaliculi that kind of feed. Well, they don't feed. The canaliculi is just cute little canals that go from the central canal to the osteocyte. So all these lines going here outward are canaliculi. Canaliculi. And this is the osteocyte. In lacunae. So this is compact bone, 100%. 100% compact bone. So these two, like the two you really can't miss is adipose and compact bone. No confusion there. Yeah? Any questions? Now this is blood. And everything's represented here. Blood. Blood smear, you could say, because you smear it onto the slide. Smear. And it looks like we did a good job. So this one is another one that's really specialized. You're not going to make a mistake here. So again, there's scanning power. You see all that white, so your eyes are burning again. And then you put it to low power at 10x. Now I can see nuclei. I see a lot of stuff. And then I get to here and high power, 40x. And I see a lot of white stuff in here. And this is all fluid. This is plasma, the fluid portion of blood. Plasma. Now you see these things, see a lot of these things, and you should. Actually, I don't see enough here. This could be anemia. There's not enough of these cells. So do you see a nucleus in that cell? Yes or no? Yes or no?
No.
No, because that's a red blood cell. It doesn't have a nucleus. Way to go. It's anuclear. Means it's not there. You see an A before something. That's a red blood cell, an erythrocyte. It's a biconcave disc that has, all it does is carry oxygen on its hemoglobin, which is inside the cell. It has a membrane. It's got a selectively permeable membrane and really relies on osmosis, right? Remember the isotonic solution, hypotonic solution, hypertonic solution. So the solution is the plasma, the liquid, that's the solvent. The membrane is the membrane of the red blood cell. So there could be a lot of salt in the cell as opposed to outside the cell. That's hypotonic solution. There could be a lot of salt in the plasma, but less inside the cytosol. That's hypertonic. But we want an isotonic, which is a nice balance of solutes from inside and outside that red blood cell membrane. That's what we want, because that'll help it maintain its shape so it can carry oxygen and get around the blood cells. I don't make this stuff up, I swear. Here's platelets. They're also anuclear. No nucleus there, even though it's staining dark. It's staining dark because these are granules, because these are for clotting. Thrombo means clotting. So these, and this is a really complicated process of clotting. These granules will send out information to other cells to come in and form a net so we don't lose blood cells. That's important. So red blood cells is an erythrocyte. Erythro means red. Eryth means red. Thrombo is a platelet. Thrombocyte. That means clot. So then we have these other things like leukocytes are white blood cells. So these happen to be, these two particularly happen to be neutrophils. And these are really important to fight bacteria. And you can see the weird looking nucleus. It's amorphous, polymorphonuclear cell. That's on your recording. You have to remember that. For AMP2 though. It has a different nucleus almost every time. It's polymorpho, means different shapes, but it has a lot of granules in it. So if you put this up to 100x, you can see the granules in that white blood cell. Leukocyte, leuko means white. So I don't think you'll ever forget that this is what a blood smear looks like. I hope not anyway. Another table. So this is, now we're into muscle. Let's stop here for a minute, see how everybody's doing. Everybody good? Good, everybody okay? Are you with me? Lisa, are you there?
Yes.
I didn't get my breakfast. Did you send over the DoorDash? I was looking. Didn't show up yet. Okay, I understand. It's bad weather. It might be just a little delayed. Mary, you're here. Good. Anybody have any questions so far? So we know, all we talked about was connective tissue so far. So we're done with connective tissue. Congratulations. I'll walk you through the APR and the Atlas before we go, though we have to do that, and I have to make sure you're on board with that. Frank's going to pick that up tomorrow or the next day. He's good. He can Google it in the meantime if he wants, or look through the PowerPoint, listen to the recording, or listen to Sophia play a guitar, whatever we have, okay? So we good? Any questions thus far? All right, let's move on to muscle. This is pretty easy if you stay with me. Okay, there's 3 types of muscle. Let's get this down now before you move on. Your lecture, I'll help you with your lecture here too. The beginning of your lecture. You're not going to get there until after the test, but okay. So there's 3 muscle types: skeletal, cardiac, which is that, all about the heart, and then smooth muscle, which is also called visceral. So visceral muscle, smooth muscle, we call it visceral because visceral means organ. So a lot of your digestive organs have smooth muscle in the walls, your blood vessels, smooth muscle in the walls, especially the arteries, thick layer of smooth muscle in the arteries. So out of the three, stay with me now, let's see if you're awake. Which one of these three can I control with my brain, which we call voluntary? Cheat if you want. Look at the table. There's only one. Which one is the one that you can control with your brain?
Is it
Skeletal.
skeletal?
You got it. Way to go. Skeletal. Thank God, because cardiac muscle is going to basically control our heart rate. It's going to pump all that blood into that aorta. And this thing really has to do a lot of work constantly. Which one is not striated? I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. I'll show you, but which one is not striated of the three?
Is it smooth?
Yeah, and that's why they call it smooth. It's not striated. You don't see that visual dark and white alternating lines. Phew. So the only voluntary one is skeletal, which is the one we use our brain, our cerebral cortex, to start a muscle contraction, skeletal muscle contraction. You're going to learn all those muscles after bone. Cardiac and visceral you'll do in AMP2. So skeletal muscle, of course, you know, we use that. You learn about respiration, how we need oxygen, you need ATP, you need glucose to get that energy for muscles to contract. You need calcium. Calcium is really important. You talked about calcium, right, in lecture. So you can't have muscle contraction without calcium. You can't have muscle contraction without ATP. That's skeletal muscle and cardiac. But think of skeletal muscle versus cardiac. You know, skeletal muscle, we could run outside, shovel snow, walk around the block 10 times and our legs get tired, our arms get tired. So we used up all our ATP and oxygen, but then we could rest and it comes back. We can go inside and, make hot chocolate or whatever, scotch, whatever you drink. And then your muscles will replenish that consumed oxygen and ATP. So it's kind of like using a credit card with skeletal muscle. You could buy now and pay later, right? But cardiac muscle, this is, Frank is, he's 6 weeks old. His heart starts to develop. It starts to beat, and it's got to contract on the average of 75 times per minute for the rest of his life. So cardiac muscle is cash only. That ATP has to be there all the time. That calcium has to be there all the time. And that oxygen has to be there all the time. Oxygen into those muscle mitochondria. So skeletal cardiac muscle has a lot of mitochondria. So smooth muscle, again, no striations. So let's, flowchart alert. And this is kind of good. It tells you about the nuclei of each muscle type, right? They all have nucleus. This is not a red blood cell. Do they branch? Where are they located? Are the cells branched, right? So here's kind of a flow chart, the difference between cardiac and skeletal, and then smooth. And so be careful. You don't want to confuse smooth muscle with dense, regular connective tissue, or even fibrocartilage. Yeah, that's where the stick points get. So I give this flow chart like a C+. I'm not loving it. It's okay though. So let's look at the tissue. So this, my friends, again, let's look at it at low power. I'll tell you straight up though, this is going to be skeletal muscle. And that's what you have to say, skeletal muscle. So scanning power, I can't really tell. I see a lot of nuclei. It's already at high power, so the slide is a good one. So let's just blow it up to high power. So the thing here, this is skeletal muscle. The cells are here, like in between here. Cells are here. Cells are here. So these are, and this is irregular, like this is a cell. And the nuclei of skeletal muscle is multinucleated. That's really important. Multinucleated. It's the only one that has a lot of nuclei. And the nuclei is peripheral, meaning it's not in the center of the cell, like it's not here. It's on the periphery. It's on the outside of your door, like your hedges along the side of your house. So it's multinucleated. I mean, it's voluntary already. It's the only one that's voluntary. And then if you look really close, you can see striations, dark, 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 very linear, straight lines. Even the cells are in straight lines. So the dark fibers are proteins called myosin. The light areas are a protein called actin. So this is where actin and myosin come in. And you're going to see that in cardiac as well. And it's in smooth too. You just don't see the striations. So this is striated. And what does this do? What does this muscle do? It generates heat. We know that when it contracts. It contracts to move bones, right? It contracts to move joints. Generates heat. Yes, needs a lot of ATP. So this is a very specialized tissue. Again, looking at it now, okay, I see the nuclei. I can't really tell if it's peripheral or central. But this is cardiac muscle. Cardiac means heart. So let's take a look. Now this is involuntary. You told me that, which is true. So let me look closer now. Again, the cells kind of look the same. The only thing is they're kind of more, and this is not a great picture, to be honest with you. There's one thing that tells me it's cardiac, but cardiac muscle is single or double nucleated. It could be either, but mostly single nucleus. And it's central nucleus. And if you look close, you see striations. You see actin and myosin, clearly striated. Maybe not as linear as skeletal muscle. And then if this, again, this is not a great slide to show you you need a little bit more of less of a power, but cardiac muscle is branched. Or branching. So it kind of looks like this. It's more like kind of branched around, and you have like this, and you have different branches like here and here. Then you have the striations and a centrally located nucleus. Striations, centrally located nucleus. Then it has these lines, and this is the hallmark. Cardiac muscle has these lines, and this is what makes it different. Especially, this is the hallmark of cardiac muscle. So this is definitely going to be one of your answers. So this is a junction that's formed with connective tissue between cardiac muscle cells. And it allows for things like calcium, sodium, potassium to flow from cell to cell. There's gap junctions within these discs. So here it is. They're called intercalated discs. And those are the hallmark. Here's another one of cardiac muscle. Cardiac intercalated. Cardiac intercalated. That'll be a short song for Sophia. So this, my friends, is cardiac muscle. Whew. Here's smooth. Now, this is what I told you before. You got to be careful that you don't call this dense regular connective tissue, because these are, now again, this is visceral. This is involuntary, lacks striations. So it has actin and myosin, but it just doesn't have that linear setup. Myosin is the thick one, remember. But again, this does not have that appearance. So it's single nucleus, and it's central. And these are usually spindle-shaped. So Sometimes they call it a spiral nuclei. So let's move up on the power here. Let's look at the bottom one. Not a great slide, to be honest with you. This one I would like better. Smooth muscle. So this is not dense irregular connective tissue. It's not dense regular connective tissue. You have to put those together and compare the two, because that's where students make mistakes all the time, and I can understand why. Okay? Crazy, 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 crazy. Okay, so that is muscle. So you have to be able to tell the difference between the three, and I'll ask you some of those questions about which one's voluntary, which one's involuntary, which one's not striated, which one's branched, which one's multinucleated, which one's spindle-shaped. Where are the intercalated discs? That's cardiac muscle. So that's pretty good. That shouldn't, don't make that harder than it is. But again, I'll try to put like connective tissue in one group in the test, epithelial tissue in another, and then specialized tissue like cartilage, bone, bone too, adipose, which is specialized CT. And then I'll put blood, and then I'll put the different ones like muscle we learned, and then we're going to do nervous tissue now. And that's it. So let's go to nervous tissue. And then we finished all the tissues. Okay, so neurons are the functional cell, or the parenchyma. Remember we said stroma before? Stroma is like the structure with the reticular fibers and collagen. Parenchyma is the actual functional cell. So a neuron, you know, I've looked at this histology before, and it kind of looks like a kite, like it has these dendrites on the end. And this is definitely going in the Whitney Museum after I draw this. So if you want my signature, just let me know. It has a nucleus. Then it has these long processes called axons. And then it has like dendrites. I'm sorry, not dendrites. It has axon terminals. So a neuron basically looks like this with the cell body. Kind of looks like a kite. Like this is the kite, and this is the string of the kite. Here's the nucleus of the cell body of the neuron. This is called the axon. And they look like strings in the histology. And these are called axon terminals. You're going to thank me for this. You do neural. So the depolarization, or the input, goes into the dendrites. These are dendrites, these little tree-like branches. So this is the functional cell. This is the neuron. Looks like a kite, if you will. Glial cells are not neurons. They're not even nerve tissue. These are supportive cells for the nervous system. There's 6 different cells between the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. You don't have to know this today, but glial cells look different than neurons. And there's more glial cells in the nervous system than there are neurons. Maybe like 80-20, 80% glial cells and 20% neurons. But the nervous system is really the neuron. That's what's really doing all the work. So they're supporting cells. They'll make like insulating proteins, lipoproteins called myelin. You'll hear the term myelin. They make that. They connect the blood to the neuron. They have a lot of supporting processes. And so glial cells basically is, if somebody gets brain cancer, which is horrible, it's usually a glial cell cancer, because neurons don't undergo mitosis very often. They're amitotic. Glial cells are much more mitotic. So it's a different cell. So here we go. If you look, you could see the cell body, you can see the nucleus, the dendrites, and this is the axon. I don't know if you get this confused with any other tissue. This is pretty unique compared to everything we looked at. Don't you agree? And all the nuclei that surround the neurons, like all these wires, so you know, they're strings, but they're really like wires, truly like wires, because they're electric. They're all axons, right? So it really doesn't tell you that. Soma means body too. Cell body is that whole, this whole structure, like this right here is a cell body with the nucleus of the neuron. So you have to differentiate the nucleus of the neuron versus the glial cell nuclei. And sometimes you can't do that. It has to be clear. Like this is a really clear picture, the one on top. But this one, you could see the difference between the neuron and the glial cell nuclei. So take a good look at this one. This should be easy points for you. There's nothing looks like this. And let's look at the one on the bottom. Just this one, that's a little bit more difficult because there's more fibers. You know, fibers are usually the axons. Like they'll say nerve fibers, like fiber optics. So don't get this, please don't get this confused with reticular connective tissue. So we're gonna have to, you know, I'll cruise you through the APR and see what we're gonna have to look at. So that's nervous tissue. That's all you need to know about nervous tissue for now. Again, you're gonna live this ad nauseum later on. So you do a little, you could use this if you like, because there's no real lab where you have to fill anything in. So you kind of have to just prepare yourself for all this. So this kind of helps you. So this is a tough one. So this one is cardiac muscle. You can see the intercalated discs and the centrally located nucleus. It's hard to see the striations on there. It's not the best slide. This is epithelial tissue, right? This is the skin. This is the stratum corneum of the epidermis of the skin. This is all dermis down here. This is dermis. And the different layers of epidermis you're going to learn in the next lab start here, like the stratum basale, which is epithelial tissue, base. So this is the top of the skin here. So this is all epithelial tissue here. This is all loose, dense, irregular connective tissue. So I hope you get this. This is important. I think this is a good one to practice with. So let me just show you. The top is the epidermis, all the way down to here. So I can draw a line between. This is my line. So everything up here is epidermis. Down here is dermis. Dermis is dense, irregular connective tissue. And if we look close, it kind of looks like that. Fibroblasts, collagen. This is all epithelium. Stratified, squamous, keratinized epithelium here. But this is a better picture at low power, because then you could see the difference between the transition between the epidermis and the dermis. So all of this is epidermis, and it's epithelial tissue. We'll learn this next week in great detail. It's 4 layers, actually. It could be 4 or 5 layers of epithelial tissue, strata. And this is the dermis, which is right below, because epi means top of the dermis, epi top, and dermis is below. And below the dermis is the hypodermis, which is not shown here, but that's more adipose tissue. So go through these. This is bone, right? It looks like nothing else. You know, central canal and the osteocytes. Then you go through here. Well, this is now you have a lumen, and this is kind of like the basement membrane is here. This is a simple columnar epithelium, and you have to look close. And here's goblet cells, right? Goblet cells. Goblet cell. Remember those goblet cells right in here? So this gives you a pretty good practice. This is pseudostratified. So now here's a lumen. This is pseudostratified columnar epithelium with goblet cells. So all these little hairs up top is cilia. It's silly. Like in the trachea, the lumen of the trachea where the oxygen and CO2 is. Hopefully that's all that's in there. And here's more goblet cells. This is pseudostratified columnar ciliated epithelium. Remember, pseudostratified means they're all simple, but they look like they're stratified. Airways, trachea, and goblet cells. Goblet cells produce what? Anybody remember?
Mucus.
You got it. Goblet cells mean gobbing up the mucus. All right. Look at this crazy one. This is transitional. Transitional epithelium. This one you have to go at high power, simple cuboidal. Right? Here's the lumen of the kidney tubules. These are just one cuboidal cell with the membrane. Craziness, right? This is my favorite, the one that's behind me. This is hyaline cartilage with the chondrocyte in lacunae. Crazy. This is more skin. That's the stratum corneum. Okay, so we'll go through that next week. We'll go through and we'll do a review, which we're going to need. Let's face it. We got